prayer. We've got a lot of traveling going on. The Walkers are out on vacation. We're glad to see the Willoughbys today. They weren't glad to see us. They were supposed to be gone, but their van had to get some repairs. But do pray for them that that will take place, and that they will be able to get on the road for their trip. And we've got college students that are going to be traveling here in the next few weeks as college is ending. If you think about it, pray for our college students. It is finals season, which means that they are frantically trying to get to the end of the semester, finish projects, maybe for graduation or for finals, and just a high-pressure time for them. So do remember to pray for them, pray for their travels as they begin making their way home. Pray for, as well, for Julia and her move coming up. And she is excited to come up here. So Genesis chapter 30, and we have we're picking up in the middle of looking at this portion of Jacob's life. And really, this is a portion of life. Chapter 30 touches about 20 years of life. And so in these verses, there's a lot going on. We have looked at the beginning of a family. And we looked at when relationships become a competition. We have two wives, and we saw where Jacob was deceived and given Leah as his bride, and then Rachel was kind of tacked on as a finishing of the deal. And so Jacob worked how many years for Rachel? Initially, how many years did he work? 7. But he got Leah, and then he had to work another 7 years for Rachel. And so in a 24-hour period, Jacob went from 7 years of labor in one wife to 7 years of labor in 2 wives with another 7 years. So he was at a rough point in his life. But these 2 ladies, these 2 wives, it's interesting when you look at this because they're fighting for the attention. They think that their fulfillment is going to be found in the attention of Jacob. And it's interesting as well, they're fighting for 2 different reasons. One is looking for love, right? Leah was tender-eyed. She didn't capture Jacob's attention. It wasn't Leah that Jacob wanted. And she's fighting for love. Rachel, on the other hand, finds herself in this relationship and she's fighting for worth. Why? Because they go into this marriage and Leah, boy, she just begins popping the babies out. And Rachel's going, I don't have any children. God's not giving me any children. And it's interesting that they both find and think they're going to find this fulfillment and the attention of Jacob. Listen, beloved, a marriage relationship needs to be strong, and there needs to be a love between the husband and wife. But finding fulfillment in the marriage cannot come from simply having the attention of your spouse. Now, it's good and right for our spouses to give us attention and for us to give them attention. But the truth is, a marriage that is not God-centric, you can give attention, but that fulfillment is not all going to be there because God is not in the center of it. And it's going to have struggles. But listen, poor Jacob, he was first 2 imperfect people, then became 3 imperfect people, and then became 5 imperfect people because handmaids got in on the deal as well. And it's hard enough, beloved, for 2 imperfect people to be in a relationship. We need the Lord. We need God in our marriage relationship. And so we find this relationship becoming a competition. They're having children, and they think that children are going to be the answer. This competition between Leah and Rachel amps up, and poor Jacob is in the middle of it, and Jacob's not doing what he should be doing because he ought to be leading and not passive. And so, you know, in year 7 that Jacob is there, he marries Leah and Rachel. Leah quickly conceives, and then in year 7 to 10, Leah bears Reuben and Simeon and Levi and Judah. And then in year 10, Rachel is kind of desperate, and she gives Bilhah as a surrogate, and Bilhah bears Dan and Naphtali. And then approximately year 11, Leah, seeing her advantage slipping away, gives Zilpah, her handmaid, to Jacob, and she bears Gad and Asher. And then in years 11 through 13, Leah bears again Issachar, Zebulun, and a daughter, Dinah. Near the end of year 13 or beginning of year 14, Rachel finally conceives, and she bears Jacob. So we see this competition, and we've looked at the ins and outs of that, but we also see the danger of desperate decisions, and that's where we kind of left off in the middle of this. What began to happen? Look at verse 14. And Reuben went in the days of wheat harvest and found mandrakes in the field and brought them unto his mother Leah. And Rachel said to Leah, Give me, I pray thee, of thy son's mandrakes. The mandrakes were something that was looked at as something that produced fertility. There is no proof of that, and as much as I've tried to research and find any validity to the mandrakes and them producing anything that would create fertility, there's no proof of that. It's a superstition of their day. And so she says, Give me, I pray thee, of thy son's mandrakes. And she said unto her, Is it a small matter that thou hast taken my husband? Oh man, see the bitterness that's still there? I mean, think of the irony in that statement. Who's making that statement? Leah's making that statement. Who took whose husband? I mean, boy, there's still a lot of bitterness and competition going on here. Is it a small matter that thou hast taken my husband? And wouldest thou take away my son's mandrakes also? And Rachel said, Therefore he shall lie with thee tonight for thy son's mandrakes. And Jacob came out of the field in the evening, and Leah went out to meet him, and said, Thou must come in unto me, for surely I have hired thee with my son's mandrakes. And he lay with her that night. And God hearkened unto Leah, and she conceived, and bare Jacob the 5th son. And Leah said, God hath given me my hire, because I have given my maiden to my husband. And she called his name Issachar. Now, I want you to stop and think about this verse here for a moment. All right? What did Leah say? And we're going to deal with something specifically here as we're in this part of the narrative. What did she just say? I mean, think about what she said. God has heard me and answered my prayer because I gave my handmaid as my husband's, to be my husband's wife. Does that make sense? Do you think her thinking is right here? And her reasoning? It's a little mixed up, isn't it? But I want you to keep this in mind, because sometimes our minds go that direction. You say, oh, Pastor, I would never say that about... No, you may not say that specifically about that circumstance, but I want us to think about this, because our minds can go in a direction, if we're not careful, that make God small. Keep on reading. Leah conceived again and bare Jacob the 6th son. Leah said, God hath endued me with a good dowry. Now will my husband dwell with me, because I have borne him 6 sons. Again, bad reasoning. If he's a good husband, he's taking care of all of his wives. I'm sorry, he's in this predicament, but he's got a lot of wives to take care of and a lot of children to take care of. Bad reasoning. And she called his name Zebulun. And afterward, she bare a daughter and called her name Dinah. And so here we're in the midst of this place where these ladies now are coming to where they are making desperate decisions. What have they done? They've given their handmaids to their husband to bear more children. And now we find that the mandrakes are playing a part in this. And no doubt Rachel is desperate, right? I mean, she has no children. Bilhah has born a couple of sons to Jacob. But in all honesty, when we look at the handmaid theory or the handmaid practice, how has that worked out in the book of Genesis? When Sarah wanted a son, seed raised up to Abraham, and she said, I'm going to give him my handmaid, and she'll bear on my knees. What was she saying? Her son will be like my son. Did that work? Did it work out? No. And so now these mandrakes come into the picture. Surely this is going to be the answer. And so Rachel gets the mandrakes. And what happens? Jacob goes into Leah and he lays with her. Leah conceives. Rachel has these mandrakes. No doubt Jacob has been with her as well. Does Rachel conceive? We need to be cautious when it comes to when we find ourselves in places where we feel desperate. Maybe you've been in a place like that where you just don't know what to do, and you find yourself in our flesh, we become so willing to even to grasp at just at anything that will make the situation better, or that will bring us to the place that we think happiness is going to come. And these ladies are just doing this all around, back and forth. People often look to external solutions to fix problems that God is in control of. And we need to be careful. We can become very superstitious in how we view life. And here, these mandrakes, Rachel's grasping at straws. This is going to help me. This is going to give me my answer. But I want you to understand this. Superstition makes God seem like he is keeping emotional score. Think about this. Think about the statement that Leah made. Oh, God gave me a child. God must be listening. God must be in my favor. We need to be careful. And it can be in ways of what we do or things that God withholds from us. Have you ever been tempted to think, well, I missed 2 of my devotions, so God's punishing me? That's a distortion. What does it do? It projects onto God the small and vindictive tendencies of fallen humanity. It imagines a God who is insecure, easily angered, quick to retaliate, more like the pagan gods, right? Now, I want you to think about this. Now, we're going to jump into the future, probably about 10 years in these ladies' lives. Do you remember when Jacob left home? Laban pursued them. Why did Laban pursue them? You remember? What was he looking for? Yeah. Rachel had stolen the idols. All right, I want you to think about this. Because many times, this world the rudiments of this world, as Paul describes them, the things of this world, the culture that we get into, if we're not careful, it can begin to affect our thinking, and even our thinking about God. And here are these ladies who are projecting onto God the characteristics of the pagan gods of the land. Listen, God is not vindictive or petty. His ways are higher than ours. What does it say in Isaiah 55? My thoughts are not your thoughts. My ways are not your ways. My ways are higher than your ways. My thoughts are higher than yours. God's discipline, when it happens, is for our good. To make us share in His holiness, as Hebrews 12 talks about. Not because He's emotionally lashing out at us. And sometimes we're tempted in our flesh to project that thinking onto God, and that is not God. What happens when we begin to think superstitiously? We live in fear. We live in guilt and anxiety instead of faith and trust. Think about Rachel, grasping at straws, trying to have a child. Why isn't God listening to me? What is wrong with me? What can I do? No, what should her response have been? It should have been faith and trust. And I know that's hard because we're talking about personal struggles that these ladies are going through. Real life struggles that people today, and we're seeing it rampant in society today, where people are struggling today now to conceive. It is a topic of national health conversation. And so this is real life that we're dealing with here in these women's lives. And we have to be careful because our view of God can be affected by our culture. And if we're not careful, we begin to live in fear and guilt and anxiety instead of faith and trust. We become self-centered in our thinking, believing everything hinges on our actions and not God's grace. We diminish God's character. We portray Him as cruel and harsh and unpredictable rather than as a wise and loving Father. And so we need to be careful not to allow superstition to bring God down to a level of pettiness in your thinking and perceptions of Him. Instead, lift Him up. Put Him in the place that He ought to be. He is holy. He is glorious. He is God. He is sovereign. Not some petty God who takes out His emotions on us. Put Him in the place that He belongs. And here we have these desperate decisions, the danger of desperate decisions that these ladies are going through. And they're thinking that God is treating them like pawns on a game board. But I want you to look as God is at work. And I'm so thankful, beloved, that God is patient and God is loving and long-suffering and merciful and good. Because I don't know about you, but if I were in God's place and I'm looking at these ladies in this circumstance, I'm about ready to be done with them. But there's far more at stake, right? What's God doing here? What are we seeing God putting into action here? He's putting into action His plan of redemption for mankind. And here these ladies, in their pettiness and in their lack of trust, They're trying to work all of these things, and God is at work. Oh, God's not working. God's not giving. God's not doing. No, God is at work. Look at verse 22. And God remembered Rachel, and God hearkened to her and opened her womb, and she conceived and bare a son, and said, God hath taken away my reproach. And she called his name Joseph, and said, the Lord shall add to me another son. Now we find the peace and the grace of God in his timing. The moment Rachel has longed for has come. And she gives birth to Joseph, a child who would later save Israel. He would save his family. You know, many people wait years for a dream to be fulfilled. Whether marriage, children, or success, God often delays so that we learn dependency on him rather than our own efforts. God is in control. Think about this. What does it say about the birth of Christ in Galatians? How does Paul describe it? In the fullness of time. Think about that. Go back to John the Baptist, right? Zacharias and Elizabeth. Can you imagine all of those years waiting for a child? Why isn't God giving us a child? Why hasn't this happened? You know, what is wrong with me? What is going on? Well, beloved, when did John the Baptist need to be born? Right about the time that Jesus came, right? Why? Because he was a forerunner of Christ. Was God not at work in Zacharias and Elizabeth's lives? Had God just set them on a shelf and forgotten about them? No. God was at work. He was fulfilling his plan. It just wasn't in their timing. And so many times, beloved, we view peace and fulfillment and happiness as something that has to happen in my thinking, in my timetable, in my way, the way I see it, and we don't think about it from the aspect that God is at work and God is going to answer when it is right and best for me. And so we go searching after peace. We go searching for happiness. We go searching for fulfillment. But God's right there. Does it make it any less hard? No, it's still hard circumstances. It was hard for Rachel to go through those years of not having a child. But God was there. And God had a plan. I'm sure there was a reason why God didn't want Joseph to have the memories and the experiences of being around Laban that his older brothers had. He came when it was right. Let me ask you a question. Was God faithful to Rachel? Was he faithful to Rachel? Okay. Is God faithful? Will he be faithful to you? Sometimes that's harder to rattle the head up and down, isn't it? It is. Here's a harder question. Does that mean
He will give you what you want. Oh. Does that mean he will follow your timetable? And so here's the hard question. Are you willing to trust God and his plan for your future, even when his timing and his gift is different from yours? That's hard. That's hard. And these ladies are learning this. No doubt Jacob is learning this along with a lot of other lessons. What can we take away from this? Trusting God's promises is important, and we ought to trust God's promises instead of manipulating outcomes. Don't try to make it happen instead of waiting for God to provide. Again, we're dealing with things that can go into some pretty hot button issues of the day, aren't we? Things in which we need to get close to God about. And I want you to just, think about this. We live in a day that was nothing like what Rachel and Leah lived in. Right? We talked about surrogacy. There are all kinds of things and issues that are touch ethical things that we've got to weigh out. How about stem cell research? So what does that have to do with this? Well, what happens if you get a sickness? Big Bob's got cancer. Stem cell research. Do you want to become a part of a research project that employs that? Oh, boy, if it helps my cancer. Hold on a second. We're dealing with what God's plan is. And yes, we want to get better. There's nothing wrong with us wanting to get better. How about the ethics of that, though? What kind of stem cell research? I want to have children, and I've struggled with viable pregnancies. The doctors say, "Oh, well, CRISPR is the answer." Anybody know what CRISPR is? That's being pushed today. CRISPR is a revolutionary technology that gives scientists unprecedented control over manipulation of the genetic information of living organisms. You know what they're saying with CRISPR? You can choose the gender of your baby. You can choose whether or not to have a boy or a girl. We can predict whether or not your child may have a developmental delay. And just like that, we can change the genetic structure. Folks, we're getting into days where, in their day, these were serious issues that they were dealing with. In our day, boy, we got all kinds that are coming down the pike. And our relationship and our walk with God is important. And our trusting Him and seeking Him for what is good and right is important. And we have to be careful to answer the question, am I manipulating outcomes? Am I trying to manipulate outcomes? Or am I trusting God? What else does Jacob learning? Leadership means responsibility, not passivity. The man was passive in his family, and it was a mess. Family problems cannot be solved by more stuff. Sons, handmaids, mandrakes. If I just get this, if I just get that, my family will be better. No. Only God's love and approval can satisfy the deepest needs that we have. And then bitterness and jealousy are always poison to the relationship. And we see all of this in the lives of these ladies. And Jacob is now at a serious point in his life. He's got a growing family. There are issues that need to be dealt with. He's in a place where he's got an uncle that is just as conniving as he is. And as we step into the next portion of his life and begin that next week, we're going to find that Jacob is saying, you know what? There's no place like home. It's time to leave. And we're going to find that that doesn't necessarily make life better for him. And so we'll look at that next week. Father, we thank you for the lives of these people. Lord, as we consider the life of Jacob and Rachel and Leah, Lord, there are so many lessons to learn. So many things for us to think about. Lord, help us to remember that you are in control. You have a plan. Lord, whether it is what they are facing with family and children, or Lord, modern day issues of ethics, medically, Lord, may we not turn to things, may we not function from a superstitious mindset. But Lord, may we seek to know you for who you are, the Almighty Sovereign God. And Lord, may we understand and learn from these that our fulfillment and our happiness and our peace is not found in things and in what we perceive to be the answer, but Lord, they are found in you and what you give us as best. And when you lay it out and what the timeline is, Lord, that is yours to lay out. So, Father, help us not to be impatient in our lives, not to come to a place where we're making desperate decisions. But, Lord, we'll learn from these, and we will walk with you in faith and trust. And, Lord, that we will walk with you in wisdom and discernment, because your way is always right. Father, bless us this week. Lord, give us opportunities to live our mission, to live the Great Commission, to walk in grace, to be the church for the glory of God. Lord, help us to be testimonies to your glory, to your grace. Lord, give us the opportunities to share the gospel, to make gospel contacts. Lord, help us to see your blessings and your hand at work in our lives each day and every moment. And may we rejoice in them. And Lord, even when we're dealt something hard, Lord, may we thank you for it and know that you're at work and that your way is always right. Dismiss us now with your blessings. In Jesus'